Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. In today's session, I'm with Timi Merriman-Johson, known as Mr. Money Jar himself. Some of you may know him from Instagram, giving us great tips and infographics on how we can better utilize our money. And basically, we're going to be talking about how we're dealing with COVID-19, how we're coping with it, and maybe even delve into some of his secret tricks and all that kind of stuff when it comes to personal finance, investing, or whatever it is that we talk about. So over to you, Timi. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Mike. Timi here, founder of Mr. Money Jar, a financial education company for people in the UK.
And how did you actually get into being known as Mr. Money Jar? Or where did that start?
Well, I've been running Mr. Money Jar for almost a year now, but I've always been interested in money, how it works, how you make it, and at the same time have felt like there's just certain types of information that should be out there and should be accessible to everyone. And this is just my way of sharing everything I've learned over the last 3-4 years with everyone in a way that's simple to understand.
No, I can definitely resonate with that. And for the people obviously who don't know me, I'm a life coach, an author, and amongst many other things. But like you, very interested in human potential, personal development, and how you can strategically position yourself to actually achieve, what you say you want to do long after the feeling is gone.
Yep.
So it's good. It's good to and especially good to have, brothers like in this sort of domain, really, do you know what I mean? Motivating the people and just sharing real knowledge. Because first time I encountered you was at the 360 event. That's the first time I actually heard you speak.
Yes, in Canary Wharf.
That's correct. And you just came across as very factual, knows this stuff.
Thank you.
Very concise, and so I can see why people can actually get a lot of value from what it is that you actually deliver online and through your events as well.
Yeah. Likewise, I think you came across very impactful, and we had a really good conversation after the event and on the tube home, and continued said conversation at Nando's. The last time both of us will go to Nando's for a while, it seems.
For those people who know, I think it was last year I had 21 sessions in Nando's. So I haven't stopped at Nando's, guys.
Yeah, I've been online. I've been seeing all these people listing all these different places they want to go once the lockdown ends, and mine is just one place, Nando's.
Yeah,
I don't, that, man. I have a red chili and everything.
This is it. This is it. Yeah, need to definitely go in, man. So obviously, we're amidst a pandemic, and we have the likes of Ray Dalio and others saying that we're pretty much really showing signs of the depression that the world has seen back in the 1920s, 1930s. And I just wanted to get your view on how you're taking all of this. What has your experience been like in terms of COVID-19?
Well, I think firstly, Ray Dalio is a really good person to be listening to. He's really smart, and he's got a really unique perspective on the market, and particularly market crashes. He's also got a great video on YouTube called Everything is a Machine, in which he talks about almost everything in life occurring in cycles. And he talks about the economic cycle a lot. And for people like us who are maybe, late 20s, early 30s, for us, this will be our first major economic downturn. I remember not really understanding what happened in the last one in 2008, because I was just starting uni then. But since then, having read about what happened at the time, I'm like, wow, that was really, really bad. But I just wasn't old enough to be impacted by it. So this is our first one. And what I have to say to the whole we're going into a recession, depression thing is, technical definition of a recession aside, which is 6 months of negative economic growth. Recessions happen every 10 years. We've had a recession every 10 years since the 1930s, lasting anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. So this, to quote Ray Dalio, is just another one of those.
Mm-hmm.
What it's up to us now is how we react to it and the opportunities we take advantage of as a result of it.
You make some very, very good points. And again, that's that conciseness coming in that I was talking about. For me personally, when listening to what you're saying and really assessing what's happening, I start to think of patterns, and I start to think of cycles, as you suggest to and Ray Dalio suggests to. And what are some of the patterns or cycles we could use to our advantage, at least be composed about the situation?
Sure thing. So firstly, don't want to make light of anyone who's been impacted by this thing. There are people who are ill, there are people who are dying. But from a purely, because my thing is money, from a purely financial perspective, simple way of putting it is a market crash from the perspective of the long-term investor is a bit like Black Friday. It's when perfectly good investments, perfectly good businesses sell at much lower prices on the stock market than they normally would. And it offers an opportunity for people to buy things that, even as recently as kind of November, December, were really, really expensive relative to now. So I've had quite a few coaching calls with people. I've helped some people set up investment accounts. And I said, now is the time you want to start investing, because it's not really a case of, from my perspective, if we recover from this, but when we recover from this, the upside from the investments you make now will be all the more because the market is depressed at the moment.
And would you say it is sensible for people to start thinking about any potential investments? And if so, what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a really big fan of index funds. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff, and we're on Zoom right now, and I know Zoom's stock price is doing a madness at the moment because everyone's sort of using it. But I'm a big fan of low cost, diversified investments, and a favorite fund of mine is an S&P 500 index tracker fund. I think the underlying businesses of that have very good long-term prospects, and you can invest using platforms like Vanguard and Hargreaves Lansdown for a fraction of a percent, and it's just a direct debit that comes out of your bank account every month.
That sounds really good. I know definitely during this period, I've been looking way more into the investing side of things and more index funds and ETFs and all of that kind of stuff, and just seeing what would make sense. And the S&P 500 pops up continuously. And so for you personally, are you currently investing in stuff, right now in terms of what you just suggested, or are there other things that you're looking at?
Oh, so I've been a long-term holder of index funds, for the last few years. In my I do my pension investing myself, so I have index funds in there. I haven't bought any individual companies at the moment, and that's simply because I don't think that we are through the worst of the market drops. I'm not trying to predict the market or anything like that, but I think it's far too early to know where we are with this thing, given that we don't know, how many people have COVID-19 or are carriers of the virus, what the real infection rate is. We only really know the people who've become so unwell or are showing symptoms such that they can be identified as cases. So there's a lot of data that we're not working with right now. It'd be interesting to get your point of view on that, actually, because you have a medical background.
Of course. Well, I want to be accurate. Not quite a medical background, but a public health background. And so my understanding is that obviously there's no vaccine for this specific coronavirus. This is a new type of coronavirus that has been in circulation. And so obviously public health colleagues, World Health Organization colleagues are doing the best they can to try and increase the rate at which they can license vaccinations. And I know there are a number of different types of vaccines that may be available in the market in the next coming months. That's not an easy thing to do, because even if you look at the influenza vaccine, it takes up to 6 months plus for them to actually brew the vaccine, literally. So it's ready for the population. There's a lot of things we don't know in terms of ethnicity. We know things about age as well. Of course, they've spoken about ethnicity in terms of the cases of people who have died have been people more so from BAME communities. But again, there's more diagnosis that could be done on that in terms of numbers. We understand. I haven't seen the numbers recently, but we're having anywhere between 700 to 1,000 people a day. Really be affected.
Yeah, I think last count was like 900 plus.
Yeah, 980,
yeah.
I believe, or so.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot we don't understand. And so for me, I'm waiting for numbers. And so before this conversation, I remember you saying that, there's part of you where it's like, I'm just having a normal day. There's another part of you that's just like, wow, there's a pandemic happening. I'm very much the same. I'm very much the same,
Yeah.
And it like, all I can say to this is the only thing that you have control of in this moment of time is your mindset, how you really sort of like view this whole situation and how you want to respond to it. I don't know if you had any specific questions in terms of my public health background that may be quite useful, but that is my perspective, at least anyway.
No, really valuable perspective. I tried my best to get up to speed because when they were they just started doing the daily press conferences and they're talking about we're following the science, we're listening to the science. I went and read the Imperial paper that got published which the government was basically using as its guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I really got a sense of, because when we went to Nando's,
mm-hmm.
you said very early on that this is quite scary.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, doesn't seem that scary to me, but yeah, after seeing how viruses spread, and when you get this kind of combination of highly infectious virus with a really with an unusually long incubation period, you get the situation we're in now. And yeah, it's really surreal. Also because I count myself very lucky. I don't know anyone directly who's been directly affected by this. So I sort of wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go to the global pandemic happening. Let me just stay inside.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really hear what you're saying. Like, and this is obviously quite personal, but in the past week, I've had 2 family members pass away, and this is not due to
condolences,
coronavirus. Man. No, it happens, and we just have to remain strong as family members and individuals. But they weren't coronavirus related, but the impact that may have had in terms of care is something that the system is definitely hurting right now. In terms of like even thinking about the fact that businesses are small businesses are closing down, or big businesses have to furlough their companies, or underlyingly in dodgy ways get rid of people. If I think about the NHS, it's dependent upon taxpayers' money. So for how long can we consistently hold a system that has to deal with the capacity that it's dealing with now? I start thinking about that. Obviously, there has been an injection into the financial system right now, the economy, so to speak, and that money's not free. What does that mean for us, in the next couple of years? And so I start thinking about all of these other things and what that means for us as individuals, because the microeconomic view and the macroeconomic view are not so different, but are different at the same time. And for me, it's more about the individual. What can the individual do? What can the units do to make sure they survive this mentally and all of those different types of ways?
Yeah. It's very strange, just a huge amount of cultural change we've seen in the last month as well. We've had all this technology that enabled us to work remotely, which we didn't really utilize. And then all of a sudden, we just have to use it and you just have to get on with it. I think, culturally, the expectation that you would turn up to work unwell has changed overnight. Now, I read that Walmart in the States is testing the temperatures of its employees to make sure that they're okay. And what I hope, because I've been thinking about the money side of this as well, is that we become a more compassionate economy that invests in its people first as a result of this. I think, we're very fortunate that there's been the government support that there's been in terms of furloughing staff and so on. and for self-employed people. That I don't know the details around that too much, and I just hope that we move past this as a country with the sense of, if we don't invest in our people, if we don't invest in services like the NHS, then we will ultimately crumble, as this virus has shown us.
No, most definitely, most definitely. And I guess it highlights that, dependent upon how long this goes on for, there may be a fundamental change in our monetary system even. Again, Ray Dalio speaks about this. The Kiyosakis of the world speaks about this. Many people are speaking about this. We don't know if it's true. We can only observe and wait to see what happens, so to speak. And so thinking about this as logically and as practically as you can, what can people start thinking about in terms of their money situation, in terms of how they can deal with what's happening right now?
Sure. We come back to, the very, very top level. When I speak to people who want to start investing or just want to get into good money habits, that daily pay yourself first style monthly savings habit is critical. Like we've literally seen now that you could be out of a job, you could lose your primary source of income for an extended period of months. And so you want to have that emergency fund in a bank account that you don't touch 3 to 6 months, so that if something like this happens, you have a buffer that you can live off. I think that, we talked about the investing thing. Now would be a great time to open an investing account and start. It's not with investing, it's not about how much you invest, it's about how early you start and how often you do it. And again, you can start with really, really small sums with an investing account, because of all the technology that we have. And I think, I don't know, it's interesting. Like, I'm a really big believer in entrepreneurship and, building businesses and kind of doing your own thing. But one of the questions I have is, are we good off the back of this? Are we going to become a nation that just wants to get a safe and secure job?
That's a very good question.
Are we going to teach our kids that?
Well, I immediately, there's this book called The Fourth Turning by a guy called William Strauss. And he talks about how there are 4 phenotypic sort of generations. And the millennial generation so far imitates the hero generation, so to speak. The sort of generation that went through World War II, between 1 and 2, which is quite interesting because we think about cycles. We think about people talking about the Depression and what we're seeing now. Those parallels sort of fit. And so with that in mind, for me, in my mind, there is going to be some sort of fear, making sure that we get the foundations correct, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But inevitably, in every society, there are going to be people who are like, this is an opportunity. Like, however you are in terms of this situation right now is training for how you can be outside of this. And so if you can really be productive during this time, not kill yourself, but be productive, you will reap rewards outside of this. And what does that look like? That could look like making sure that you cultivate a community in the best way possible, really allaying into their fears and helping them solve their problems. That could mean that maybe the business that you currently right now, you offering discounts helps, get people used to buying from you. And then obviously after this, when they're ready, maybe a couple of months later, you put in the full whack and they're so ready to invest into you as an individual. That could mean that a specific business idea or technological solution may just hit off the ground because there's a new need that's been established. It's so obvious that we're moving more and more and more into a more digital age. And so that's something that a lot of people are focusing on. But what I would also argue in that is there are also really foundational things that don't really change over time, over the past 100 or 200 years. And so there's a strong case to really be a thought leader or really position yourself as the go-to platform to help people solve those specific problems. So I think it's about really identifying, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for people around you? where's the opportunities in this, and how can I capitalize, if at all? So that's what I start thinking about from an opportunity mindset.
Yeah. Are you doing anything differently with your money at the moment as a result of this?
To be honest with you, I'm in a situation where I've literally paid off a debt. So my money was freed up. I
Yep.
got a new job as well. So I've got more money. And so the difference I'm making is I'm now investing more into the S&P 500. That's something I definitely
Brilliant.
will be doing. I've made calculations and everything on this. I'm an Excel sort of like themed a little bit. So I've
Yeah, you and me
calculated
both.
yeah, it's important. So that's what I'm doing with my money. What I'm now questioning is more about how can I make my money work for me when it comes to the entrepreneurship space. Am I
Mm,
going to be using advertising more, as an example? I don't need software and technology. That's all sorted. It's more about how, in people's faces, so to speak, do I want to be in terms of my branding and in terms of my business. So that's what I may be doing differently with my money. I'm not yet decided because I'm focusing on other stuff at the moment. So yeah.
awesome.
What about yourself? Like, has anything changed at all, or is it pretty much the same?
So if I could just speak more broadly, I think that this lockdown period has helped me to be a bit more focused and a bit more intentional with how I spend my time. There were
Fantastic.
loads of things I was trying to work out and dilly-dallying about. One thing was, like prior to this, should I be going out after work or should I be coming straight back home
Mm,
and trying to get on with things? Um, but that question's sort of been answered for me, and
mm,
I've been a lot more focused and productive
mm,
as a result of this. I'm kind of naturally introverted anyway, so there's a lot of places that I wasn't going. I do miss going to the gym,
mm,
but I think that whilst in many ways what's happening at the moment is terrible,
mm,
I will sort of look back at that hopefully brief period of time where there was no expectation for you to go out
mm,
except to exercise, except to buy food.
mm,
You could just sit around and sort of read all day. Like I'm reading tons at the moment. I
mm,
think I'll look back on it quite fondly
mm.
in some ways.
I think so too. I think so too. And I guess there's a lot of inner strength that can be developed from this whole scenario because, I recently did a podcast episode called um, uh, Isolation Allows You to Be Great, or something like that. It builds
Mm.
greatness. It builds character. It's kind of like in Batman when Bane's like, I was born in the darkness, and from that, he builds strength from it. And so there's a lot of inner strength that can be taken from this situation. And it's hard to say this, but there are definitely going to be people who benefit from this in terms of some sort of training aspect and conditioning aspect. And there are definitely people who are going to fall victim to it, and it's going to affect them for a very long time for valid reasons as well. And it shouldn't be a thing where it's like, oh, they weren't able to capitalize. They may have mental health issues. They may have been hit by it financially or socioeconomically. There are all these things into play. But I think as individuals, we need to introspectively look at our life and say, what is really different? Apart from the environment, what's actually changed? Because if anything, I see it as this highlights and crystallizes what was within us already, you know? And so with that in mind, are we happy with what's within us, or do we want to make some alterations in order for us to actually start achieving some of the goals that we set out to achieve,
Mm.
you know?
I just had another thought now as well.
Mm,
And another one of the things that I think is positive um, that's come out of this is the world has sort of been flipped on its head in terms of the people we now deem to be the most important. Like, of
mm,
course, it was healthcare workers. Of course, it was the people who serve us like who help us with our grocery shopping, the bin people, the people who provide the essential public services, um, and lots of other industries which would have had a lot of money in them have now been shut down.
mm.
I did a guide on like all of the deals that are now available to NHS workers on
That was
Instagram, for
fantastic.
example.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it just got, yeah, I'm just really happy that's happened. I hope that a lot of that stuff stays.
Mm,
Like I feel like it should have been that way anyway, and I hope we kind of go, yeah, there were some people in society that we weren't valuing enough that we should value.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I 100% agree with that. So as a key takeaway, what's the one key message you want people to walk away from when listening to this?
I just don't be, I think it's good to think long term, and this situation shouldn't stop anyone from thinking long term. As far as your money's concerned, continue saving, make sure that you have a buffer, and make sure you put that your money to work. And now is as good a time as any to start doing that. These events happen once every 10 years. So there's no time like the present.
Very sensible advice. And are there any sort of tools and resources that you can recommend to people?
Yeah, so I'm a really big fan of the app-only banks. So the Monzo, Revolut, Starling, they're all great for letting you track your money. I use a budgeting tool called Money Dashboard, which allows me to see all my accounts together. And there are a couple other apps called Emma and Yolt, which allow you to do that as well. I think a good, we've mentioned that good old-fashioned spreadsheet, money in, money out, months along the top, to set yourself long-term goals and savings targets. And then two investing platforms that I'm a big fan of are Hargreaves Lansdown and Vanguard. They are more of the kind of do-it-yourself kind of platforms, and are therefore a bit cheaper to run. Nothing wrong with the kind of more managed ones like Nutmeg and Wealthify and so on, but I think that for what you pay, you may as well do a bit of Googling and then use the cheaper services. And then, of course, people are more than welcome to visit my Instagram page. I'm Mr. Money Jar on Insta. And I'm going to be publishing a series of guides, just like little kind of bite-sized. You'll have seen my last two posts will have been those. Just little kind of financial nuggets here and there.
Guys, like if you haven't seen Mr. Money Jar's page already, literally it's littered with great information, very relevant for the times, consumable as well. So I'll definitely head over there. Are you on any other social media platforms? And do you have a website? Like, where else can people find you?
I have a landing page site, and I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter, but Instagram is my main platform for now.
Perfect. Cool. That was a great, insightful conversation. We should definitely do this more often.
Yeah, man.
I think this would be great. And you never know, in the future, you may see us both doing something that would be really useful to you guys. You never know. Man. We'll leave it there. And take care, God bless, and have a fantastic day. Peace.